Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Well, NXT's got Halloween Havoc in its rearview mirror, while AEW looks ahead to Full Gear. Which show won for the night, we're going to find out. But first, as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. NXT opens up with Ember Moon versus Dakota Kai. It's a good technical match here. I love the way Ember Moon gets cut off in the match by just taking a dive to the outside and totally eating shit on the floor. Raquel Gonzalez, with a well-timed distraction, allows for Kai to end up winning in what I thought was kind of an upset. I thought it was a big win for Kai over somebody like Ember Moon, who since TakeOver 31 has had a whole lot of hype and momentum behind her. I doubt this angle, this rivalry is over yet. I'm sure Ember's going to get her win back in some capacity soon, but big first salvo by Kai here in a great match. Cameron Grimes clearly suffering from PTSD after the Haunted House of Terror match last week at Halloween Havoc. He says he's going to be cool though, and he's going to cave in Kushida's chest. Suddenly the referee from the Haunted House match, who was a zombie in that skit, approaches Grimes. He's mooey spooked. We then see Grimes take on Kushida one-on-one, so can he overcome his big spookening from last week? It's actually a pretty straightforward match. I mean, it's pretty much business as usual for Grimes, not really showing the effects of his trauma from the previous week until there's a referee bump. Each guy has got a chance to win, but there's no ref. Suddenly, the second ref comes in. It's the zombie ref from the previous week, although now he's a human, of course. But Grimes is still very spooked, and he taps out to the hoverboard lock immediately. I thought it was a good match, but also I thought it was kind of inconsistent because Grimes is clearly just nervous from the get-go in the backstage thing. In this match, he shows none of that reluctance, none of that nervousness, and he's fine and dandy until the referee shows up. And I get that, but I'm surprised we didn't get more of a build of his kind of weak mental state, kind of like looking over his shoulder, kind of getting just throughout the match. We didn't get any of that. I thought that was kind of an attention to detail that was missing. We get some lady promos throughout the night. Before the Grimes Kushida match, we see Shotzi Blackheart being interviewed, saying she's challenging Toni Storm to a match here because she respects Toni. Really puts her over. Big babyface promo there. Then we get a counter promo from Toni, basically saying she's going to use Shotzi as a stepping stone, kind of showing more of a harder edge to Toni here. Meanwhile, speaking of hype for other women's matches, we see Io Shirai in a promo package challenging Rhea Ripley to a match for her championship. And then later on in the night, we see Rhea accepting it, and she says she's going to walk out of 2020 the same way she walked out of 2019 as the women's champion. So time will tell on that one. The odd couple of Killian Dane and Drake Maverick take on Everrise in a tag team match here. I love how Dane uses Drake as a weapon for his own purpose rather than Drake having pretty much any autonomy of his own in this matchup here. As the match goes on though, we go outside and see Pat's pack has rolled up. We see Pat McAfee, Lorcan and Birch, and Pete Dunne, who joined last week. So they enter the building. They pretty much stop the proceedings here. They beat up all the guys in this match as Pat grabs one of the cameras and looks on as the other three guys do all the dirty work. And then after the break, Pat cuts a promo in the ring, declaring them the greatest four-man group in the history of professional wrestling. That sure is a lot of hyperbole here. Pat wants to retire the Undisputed Era banner, and he does this whole spiel about their history and how they came up and how they eventually added Roderick Strong at the expense of Pete Dunne. And Pete even explains there, Roderick Strong, he betrayed me, and I showed Kyle O'Reilly, the exact same lesson. Good on them for some continuity there with Dunne in his turn as of last week. Pat says that the UE got greedy and soon nothing else in NXT mattered, which, yeah, he has a point there, actually. He says that their time is past and it's time for Pat's pack to take over. They put the banner on the rafter thingy. Those are Pat's words there. So they're about to retire it and raise it up, and they decide, no, we're going to burn it instead. So they put it in the trash can. They set it on fire. It's a big visual, very symbolic here as Pat's pack stands tall. And that was a very good promo by Pat here. Got a little rambly at times, but I guess that's what makes it a better promo. It felt more authentic in that regard. So as I get ready to leave, Killian Dane shows back up. He grabs McAfee, but the rest of his group beats him down. And then Pete Dunne slams the car door into Killian's head, and Pat's reaction's great. It's like, that's a little intense. Let's work on that. And then they drive off after Pat has some parting words. You see blood pouring out of Killian's head as a result of that. I thought this was a great segment here. Pat is such a good troll and does a great job putting over the rest of his team, and hearing them get to talk as well was also nice. I thought this was a great setup. Again, it's just a big old neon sign, as bright as this one behind me, telegraphing that there's going to be a War Games match with Pat's pack in the Undisputed Era here, but I thought this was a great heel promo. The new North American champion, Johnny Gargano's at home, and he no longer fears wheels. He loves wheels now. He says he's playing the game of life, the board game, with somebody in the Scream mask. We don't know who it is. is it's probably Candice LeRae, since like they're in their home, but we don't really know for sure. Johnny's very much obnoxious about winning the game of life, and he's going to be defending his championship against a worthy opponent next week. So we'll find out who that is. Shotzi Blackheart versus Toni Storm up next. Shotzi's hopping mad to start things off because she feels disrespected after Toni's rebuttal promo. As the match goes on, early on, Shotzi unfortunately eats shit off the top rope, but they're able to recover there. They make a point to reference the fact that the tank is not out there, Shotzi's tank, and they even mention that, hey, by the way, Shotzi drives that tank to the ring because it's a dedication to her brother who's in the military. And so they make a point to make that, to establish that emotional connection, because after this very good match, great back and forth of these two, we see Candice LeRae on the big screen, and she has discovered, she's found the tank. And so then that distraction allows Toni to roll up and win the match. Then after the match, we see Candice back on the big screen. This big SUV pulls up. Candice gets behind the wheel and runs the tank over. It drags it for a very long time before it finally breaks, and we see Shotzi is absolutely inconsolable as a result of this. And we see the shot of Candice in the car saying, you know, you cost me the women's championship last week, we're even. The Scream Mask guy is in the back seat, which at this point leads me to believe it's also Johnny Gargano in the mask. So they drive off, and Shotzi's very upset by this. And again, if you didn't hear that part where it's, oh, the tank is a tribute to her brother, then you wouldn't understand why Shotzi's crying over this toy being destroyed. But that does make sense. Like Toni even stops what she's doing and kind of tries to comfort Shotzi. It's no longer rivals or disrespect or anything like that. So I thought I like what they're doing here with Candice and Shotzi, and the tank being destroyed. As much as I hate to see it, I just hope that this means that when they eventually have their big blow-off match, Shotzi rolls up in a super tank. Earlier in the day, Legado del Fantasma show up to Full Sail, and suddenly Jake Atlas rolls up on them with a lead pipe and beats up both Wild and Mendoza with it. He stands there and stares at Santos Escobar for a second. He's got a clear shot at him, but he doesn't take it. He goes back in the car and he drives off. So that angle, that feud, clearly not over yet. Then we go to ringside, where we see the return of THATCH-AS-THATCH-CAN Wrestling, another live edition. Like before, Thatcher is really taking liberties with this young guy in the ring, just wrenching all these holds on him as he's teaching about reversals and everything. Suddenly, in comes Austin Gray, the former Anthony Green. He was the last victim in the ring of Thatcher with a training exercise. So he jumps Thatcher and he ejects him from the ring and stands tall, which I thought was great. That's a really cool way to really kind of break somebody out and establish a feud, even if it's kind of a micro feud here. I don't know what the path for Austin Gray is, Anthony Green, from there, but it's a great jumping off point for him on TV. We go backstage for an interview with Xia Li, where she explains the letters she's been getting from Boa have been letters from her family, but she will not divulge any details beyond that. But it's basically she knows she has to start winning some more matches. Suddenly, William Regal shows up and hands Xia another letter. She reads it, looks very worried, and just demands a match with Raquel Gonzalez for next week. And so now I want to know is what is in these letters, and what has got Xia Li so worked up over there? Does Nana need emergency surgery and she needs to win more matches to pay for it? Main event time, a grudge match weeks in the making as Velveteen Dream takes on Tommaso Ciampa. Dream still wearing that cast on his arm, and it plays to his disadvantage here because Tommaso attacks that cast early and often in a variety of creative ways, to the point where Dream has to finally just rake Tommaso's eyes to get any kind of advantage in this match. But whatever advantage he does have in this match does not last very long. Near the end, Dream throws a chair into the ring to try and provide some kind of distraction, but it does absolutely nothing for him. He walks right into the Willow's Bell, followed by Fairy Tale Ending. Very decisive win for Ciampa here. Dream got hardly anything in this matchup, but the finishing sequence I thought was pretty cool. But lots to wonder about the directions of both guys right now. Dream has been thoroughly trounced week after week since coming back from his hiatus, and who knows how long that trend's going to continue. Meanwhile, I feel Ciampa's kind of in this tweener position here, where I'm not totally sure what side of the face heel spectrum he's on any given week. But depending on who he's fighting, basically that's where you know where he's at. So he'd be kind of slotted pretty much anywhere right now in the upper mid card of NXT, but nothing seems like a really clear path for him. So time will tell. We'll just have to see what happens with him. Dynamite this week opens up with a backstage promo with Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, and Santana at the Inner Circle. Jericho putting over Hager's win from Bellator last week. Suddenly MJF and Wardlow interrupt, and Jericho says MJF is soft and he lacks the killer instinct needed to be a member of the Inner Circle. So MJF says, "Watch me." Jericho joins the commentary team for the rest of the evening, and we have our first match as MJF and Wardlow take on Sammy Guevara and Ortiz. These are the anti-MJF in Inner Circle camp of the Inner Circle. And the one takeaway from this match is Sammy Guevara wrestles like a proper babyface in this thing. He's flying all over the damn place, and he's definitely doing like he's playing it up like he's a white meat babyface. It just kind of comes from out of nowhere for me. But near the end, Matt Hardy in a Serpentico mask attacks him from ringside. He hits him with a chair, knocks him out. That allows MJF to lock in the Salt of the Earth armbar on Ortiz to win the match. Then afterward, on his way up the ramp, he tackles Jericho and goes through like the announce team wall set up on the stage and everything, beats him up, it gets broken up, and Jericho is smiling as he's getting up. Ooh, has MJF found the killer instinct? We go back to the tried and true format of contrasting sit-down interviews with Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, which we've seen a couple of times at least over the last several months. The first one we see is Kenny Omega with Tony Schiavone at presumably Don Callis' house, because we definitely see a picture of a young Don Callis from the wrestling days, like on the end table as they're talking here. Kenny says, everyone says it was obvious that it was going to be me and Page, but was it really so obvious? He says he was actually pulling for Wardlow for a time, but he reiterates he will win at Full Gear. And then we see later on JR interviewing Hangman Page. He feels pretty good about his situation. He's got a cocktail in his hand. JR calls Page out. He says, "Are you nervous about this thing? You don't seem that kind of confident. I think you're lying about how confident you are." So Page admits, he is nervous. It's the closest he's been to a championship opportunity since fighting Jericho in the first title match last year at All Out. And if he loses this one, all he's really going to have going for him is that drink in his hand. So like the promos we've seen before, we get more of that contrasting kind of personality. Omega is very confident. Page is optimistic, but not entirely sure about his abilities and what he can really do against Omega. It's going to be interesting how this plays out once they finally get in the ring together. Up next, Trent takes on Miro, making his singles debut in AEW. These two do have some history as they came up together in FCW many years ago. As the match goes on, Chuck Taylor shows up and beats up Kip Sabian and runs him away from ringside. It's a good match here. Trent ultimately goes for a springboard, but he slips. Not sure if that was like by design or not, but Miro hits him with the kick and hits it and locks in the game over to win the matchup. Does it again after the bell rings. Talks some more trash to Trent about his mother and how he didn't teach him any good manners. In comes Orange Cassidy, who does the big trust fall, the lackadaisical fall onto Kip and Miro to end this thing. And that's pretty much where the segment goes. Man, remember when Miro came to AEW and everyone lost their mind? It was gonna be a big deal. It's funny how time has passed. We got a hype package for the Young Bucks FTR match at Full Gear. Then we see Team Taz on stage. Taz is complaining that Brian Cage is number one in the rankings but has not received any title opportunities. Meanwhile, Ricky Starks has a great record, but he's not even ranked. Quote, "What kind of horseshit is that?" says Taz. And so then Ricky Starks talks for a bit, wondering why they don't have a match at Full Gear. Taz takes a shot at Cody and says, by the end of the night, Full Gear will have a Team Taz presence. So we'll see where that leads us. On we go to our next match. Private Party takes on the Young Bucks. And before the match begins, out comes Sammy Guevara, who attacks Matt Hardy on the ramp. It's a twist of fate. I'm getting real tired of them not being able to decide if Sammy is a babyface or a heel, because he just goes back and forth in single episodes depending on whether or not Matt Hardy's in the same room as he is. This match is pretty great. If you remember their match last year in the tag title tournament, there's some great callbacks to that match as well. My favorite part in this thing is after Isaiah Cassidy with a big dive to the outside, he goes right to the camera, blows a kiss, and spit just gets everywhere all over the lens. Matt sells his leg injury a lot here. Jericho calls him Wobbly McGee on commentary, which is great. After some close calls, Mark Quinn eats the BTE trigger, and the Young Bucks win this one, but Matt is still selling the leg pretty heavily here after this fun match. And then suddenly FTR and Tully Blanchard run in and jump the Young Bucks. They look to Pillmanize Matt's leg again when suddenly Hangman Page and then Kenny Omega come out and chase away the baddies. We get this kind of reluctant fist bump between Page and Omega. First time they've been in the ring together, I think, since they broke up as a team. And so, there's kind of this stare down afterward. Nice little subtle interaction where they don't come to blows, but it's going to be really good at the pay-per-view. We get a face-to-face with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, and the rule is these guys cannot come to blows in this, otherwise their match at Full Gear will be off. And so right from the get-go, Kingston's right in Moxley's face. face, like literally nose to nose, like rubbing noses like this as they're talking. And Kingston says he's become everything he hates because he had to have that shot at the World Championship, and that's why, you know, his mother has no grandchildren and has no daughter-in-law. And so then finally Moxley talks back, and he really gets in Kingston's head here. He brings up Kingston's mother as well and tells him he promised her that he would take care of Kingston, and all this, it really taps into this real, what feels like a real raw emotion between the two of them, talking about this fight and how it's going to be a war. And Kingston says, "You have to kill me in the ring." It's just really well done. I'm not doing it justice. You just have to see this, because damn what a promo this was. It just makes me want to see this match that much more, and I already wanted to see this match up here, but this promo just knocked it out of the park and is easily the highlight of this week's show for me. And then for the first time in months, we finally get a message from Pac. We get this really well produced promo package from him where he's surrounded by all of his clones, apparently. He talks about how he's getting, you know, faster, stronger, and more obsessed, and that he sees everything going on at AEW. Also during this package, we hear a couple of Eddie Kingston sound bites from basically when he took the Lucha Bros from Pac. You know, where is that British friend of yours? I'm the only friend who's been there for you. So it seems to be setting up a Pac-Kingston rivalry down the line. At some point, I'm really excited about the prospect of that feud. Alex Marvez interviews the Natural Nightmares about their match with the Butcher and the Blade next week, when suddenly Allie, or Bunny I should say, walks up and tells QT Marshall, "Hey, I maxed out your credit cards." And then in come Butcher and the Blade to beat up the good guys. Great footwork with the Butcher as well in the kendo stick shot, because he comes in, he hits one guy, he does a cool little spin move and follow through as he hits the other one as well. We then go to our next match as Nyla Rose, with Vicky Guerrero in her corner, takes on Red Velvet with Brandy Rhodes in her corner. It's a big squash match. She destroys Red Velvet here, even uses Hikaru Shida's own finishing move in front of Shida, who's sitting at ringside watching this, to win the matchup here. Then Vicky Guerrero gets on the microphone, calls Brandy the chief bullshit officer of AEW, and then says to Shida that Nyla's going to beat her, and then Shida grabs Vicky, Nyla comes in, and they come to blows, and it's broken up. So that is the end of our build between these two ladies for their championship matchup here. Hikaru Shida is doing a great job warming that seat in the front row, and not really getting a whole lot of in-ring action lately, it seems. And by the way, any build toward the Serena Deeb, Allison Kay match they just announced today for their buy-in match for the NWA Women's Championship? No? Cool. In our last bit of hype for the Paige Omega match, we get a very similar format to the Young Bucks FTR match, all these talking heads talking about who's going to win. And then out of nowhere, Don Callis, as in head booker of Impact Wrestling Don Callis, shows up and says he picks Kenny Omega to win. And if that's not enough, suddenly we get this montage to close out the package to the tune of "You don't know what you got till it's gone." And it just looks at Paige and Omega and their time as a team together. There's no real like conclusive like bomb kind of ending, but it just kind of like fades out like, oh, that was something. Yeah, pay those rights, man. If you can do it, that's great. But I'm definitely like, it was a good hype package, and the Don Callis appearance was a big surprise. Like I said, definitely looking forward to that matchup. We get one final video message from Darby Allin where he gets in a car with his face painted on it saying "the face of TNT," and then he runs over a friend of his wearing a Cody Rhodes mask. Well, there you go. Then we go to our main event, a 6-man tag match as Cody teams up with Billy and Austin Gunn, the Gun Club, making their tag team debut on Dynamite, taking on the Dark Order, Colt Cabana, John Silver, and Preston Vance. It's a pretty good match here. I mean, not much to say about it that really stands out to me, but it is very well performed. Again, I'm always just blown away by how tall Billy Gunn is compared to everyone else in the AEW roster. In the end, Austin with the big win. He hits the quick draw on Preston Vance and wins for his team, so good rub for Austin Gunn there. After the match, the Dark Order surround the ring, but Orange Cassidy takes out John Silver on the ramp. Cody on the mic, and he shouts at Darby Allin, who's sitting up there in the nosebleeds, very Sting-like watching, saying, you know, he's accusing Darby of lying. He's saying that TNT doesn't want him to be the face of the network. And Cody actually says, no, that's not true. You know, they want you to be the face of the network. You'd be a great face of TNT, and I pushed for you. That's why I recruited you to join AEW. But Cody wraps up the promo by saying, you know, you want the ace belt, but you're not the ace, and that's where it ends. He stands tall as, you know, he looks on at Darby who's looking down from the rafters. wonders. As we fade to black, I think the build for this, it's like, I like how every matchup on this, on Full Gear, has had different kinds of build and different like levels of intensity. Like Omega, Page, and Rhodes and Allen, relatively physicality free here. I've liked that in contrast with, you know, Moxley, Kingston, which had both of those. You had fighting, you had not fighting, and you know, other matches you've got kind of like peppered in, you know, run-ins and whatnot. So I mean, I think I like the fact that every match, or most of the matches, has different levels of intensity to their build. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and for the second week in a row, I'm going with NXT for this one. I think it has felt like a cleaner, more solid and complete show. I think most of the matches were terrific, but if I had one nitpick, I think that the Toni Storm Shotzi match and the Ember Moon Dakota Kai match had very similar kind of constructs, where they're both really competitive, like really well done, and then, oh, outside interference causes the sneaky heel win. So that's my only nitpick about those matches though, but I like how they built up other things like Pat's Pack. I thought it was a great heel promo, building up mid-card acts like Xia Li and Timothy Thatcher with a lot of intrigue there. AEW, with a couple of exceptions, most of the matches didn't do much for me, and you know, except for the Moxley Kingston promo, which, wow, like nothing else as far as promos really kind of like blew me away, except maybe for like the Omega Page hype package. But yeah, the Moxley Kingston stuff did wonders to build that match up as if it needed any more hype. But I was already, you know, all in, so to speak, with Full Gear. I'm already like invested in most of the matches. So this week didn't feel like it really added many more stakes for me on this one. But let me know what you thought about AEW and NXT this week in the comments section below, and stay tuned for later in the week with my picks for Full Gear. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.